So now we're going to talk about transformations. First, we're going to talk about the basic functions and their graphs. And this is a review. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail, but just give you some examples. So the first one we often talk about is a constant function, where you just have the function equal to some number. Say we have f of x, here's an example, equal to -4. Then c is -4. The constant function then is graphed by going to -4. And drawing a horizontal line, -4 on the output on the y-axis, the f of x axis. And so there's the graph. That's an example of a constant function. We could talk about the domain and the range and other things. And there are other constant functions. It passes the vertical line test. Anyway, that's the constant function. So we'll move on. And now we have linear functions. Hopefully you're familiar a little bit with linear functions. So let's say you have f of x equals -2x plus 3. This is an example of a linear function. We call it slope-intercept form usually. The slope here would be -2. That's the slope. And the y-intercept would be 3. So to graph it, you'd go to 3 on the y-axis because that's where the y-intercept is. And then you would count the slope down 2 and over 1, down 2 and over 1. Until you get enough points, it's linear, and then you could draw that graph. It continues, it passes the vertical line test. You could talk about the domain and the range, but that's an example of a linear function and how to graph it. The quadratic function. So this is where we start getting into a little more of the basic function and what it looks like. So we know we can make a table of values, but we know this graph's to be a parabola. It goes, I'm going to change to a different color. It goes through the point 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, 4, and then it's symmetric about the y-axis. And so it makes a parabola. You want to get that curved shape in there. Continues on, passes the vertical line test. It's a function. It's called the quadratic function. It graphs to be a parabola. And that is the basic one. Now when we go to do these transformations, that's when it's going to show up a little bit how we're transforming. Okay. The absolute value function, again, we could make a table of values for that one. It goes through the point 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, and -1, 1, -2, 2, and -3, 3. And it makes a V shape. So we want to be careful we make it look like a V when we're graphing an absolute value function and not a parabola shape. Passes the vertical line test, and that's the basic absolute value function of what it looks like. The square root function. Square root function is a little bit different because it's not defined for all real numbers. In the basic one, x has to be greater than or equal to 0. Now, they don't always put that because maybe our square root function is going to look a little bit different later on. But for this one, for the basic one, we can't put in negative numbers for x because the square root of a negative number is not real. And we're graphing on the real number system. Okay. Cartesian coordinate system. Okay, so we can come up with some points, make a table of values. It's going to go through the point 0, 0, 1, 1, and then 4, 2, and finally 9, 3. That's kind of what fits on our graph here. And so we get this shape. It kind of looks like half a parabola on its side. But remember, don't put that arrow on the 0, 0 because it's not continuing on in that direction. It's only going off in this one direction. The square root function really allows us to see some things with the transformations, but I don't know if we're going to get to a bunch of those on this sheet. The cubic function, another one you should be familiar with. It goes through 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 8, -1, -1, and -2, -8. When we graph this, we want to try to get a little bit of curve in there. Sometimes it's a little tricky to draw, especially if you have a little graph paper, but that's kind of what it looks like. All real numbers in the domain, all real numbers in the range, and it is a function that passes the vertical line test. That's the cube function. Cube root function. Well, we can think about some numbers here, 0, 0. We can put in the number 8, and the cubed root of 8 we know to be 2. We can put in 1, and the cubed root of 1 is 1. But we can also go in the negative direction, and so the cubed root of negative 1 is negative 1. That's allowed. You can take the cubed root of a negative number, because negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. And then the cubed root of negative 8, oh, you know what? I graphed that one wrong. It's at 9. Let me scoot it over. So it was 8, 2. All right. And negative 8, negative 2. And so we get this shape, kind of a snake-looking shape. But basically, it kind of looks like that other graph we had, right? You know, only just kind of laying down.